everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Embracing Wisdom with Stacie. I'm outside today. It's incredibly hot where we live, and I just felt like being outdoors while it's shady is about the only time we can be outside right now. And I'm a wimp when it comes to hot weather. I don't know, like I've just changed where the cold used to bother me so much, and now I've flipped. I can handle being cold because I can layer up, I can get warm, but I cannot get myself cool. So the heat is really, really hard for me. So I got some questions. My daughter recently turned 30 in June, and that was a big one for me. And if you're not familiar with my story, my daughter was born middle child. I believed at the time just a regular sweet little baby girl, although she was anything but sweet. She was so hard. And it wasn't until about age 3 that we started to notice that her differences were not just she was a cranky little girl, she had some pretty significant disabilities in her and developing in her. So I get asked a lot, how did you do it? Was it hard? Of course it was hard. It's still hard sometimes. But how did you kind of find your groove raising a child with multiple disabilities? And I will tell you, and many people know this, the first 10 years of my life with her was so challenging. It was really, really hard. I had two boys, one 3 years older than her, and then another son 2 years younger than her. So I had three kids, five and under, and she was presenting very, very hard from the get go. I even kind of say the pregnancy absolutely sucked. Everything was hard about this child. And the first 10 years, I was really struggling. I was very young mom. She was 23 when I was 23 when she was born. And so I was really young. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to navigate being a wife, a mom, an advocate. I didn't know I was going to soon be stepping into that role. It was really tough. And I remember her preschool years. The teachers were very, very kind and very open to talking about her differences. And they would have me come in and observe because I literally had no idea what was going on with her or when she was at school and how different she was presenting than her peers. And so that was eye-opening, and it opened a door for me to I remember taking her to her first, neurological appointment, and the neurologist was this, like, crazy-haired, curly-haired guy, kind of, Einstein-y looking, and he gave me this term that I had no idea at the time, and I remember the day 'cause I believe it to be a very profound day. He says, "She has PDD." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, PDD." And so I walked around thinking she has PDD. It's pervasive developmental disorder. Well, what does that mean? And at age 23, and there wasn't a huge like Google, I didn't know what it meant. He just basically said she's going to have a global developmental delay. That still didn't hit me. What does that mean? And it wasn't until she started kindergarten that I really started to see how different she was than her peers. And school was very, very hard for her. So hard that on the first day of school, I literally had to pick her up, carry her in, stuff her into her seat, and then run. Because if I stayed, I was going to fall apart. She was going to really fall apart. And the other kids were going to just fall apart. So it was just so hard. And as a young mom at that time, feeling very insecure about myself, I was still very, very heavy. I was packing at least 200 pounds around. My marriage was very iffy. I had an older son who was trying to navigate changing schools, getting his groove into third grade. My youngest son was in that preschool age, and it was just it was madness. And Lindsay was having such a hard time in school because the world around her did not make sense. And I didn't get that. I didn't get that her world did not make sense to her. So her way of interpreting the world was to scream and bang her head on the floor and pull her eyelashes out. And she had this season in her life where she would just rote count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And she would just do it over and over and over. Now, knowing what I know, she was trying to cope. And so we got her into, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. We went down that road. I was driving her to Denver 3 days a week for therapy. My marriage is even more falling apart. My boys are pretty much on autopilot, bless their hearts. And I'm like understanding, what does this mean? Taking her to Denver, she went to a university, kind of a clinic thing where they did more intense testing than just what the neurologist did. They found that she not only had pervasive developmental disorder, but she also had a significant speech and language disorder and anxiety disorder, and she fell on the autism spectrum. So she had a lot going on. We were working on her reciprocal language. She had a hard time finding the words and speaking. So we did a lot of um, objects to help her talk. We used signs, little picture cards, things like that to help her learn words and learn to express herself. She had a really hard time with incoming language. So giving her a direction that had too many words in it, like, hey, when you're done watching TV, go pick up your room. She couldn't have done that. It had to be very, very direct. And she did better with a visual schedule. So I started to learn some of the tools of this, but as I was diving into the tools of how do I connect with this person? How do I have a dinner that she's not screaming and pulling her eyelashes out and rote counting? How do I go to the grocery store? How do I take her to school? How do I live while this is going on and maintain my sanity, preserve my marriage, raise my boys? It was absolute chaos. The marriage didn't last. It was just too hard, and I don't get that. I get it, but I don't get it. I don't get you get to have a choice in that, but we went our separate ways. I was a single mom raising these 3 little people, and it wasn't until about age 10 when I found myself that I woke up, that I healed my heart, I healed my anger, I healed my pain, that not only did I get healthy, but my relationship with her became very healthy. Not to say that we still don't have our moments. She no longer has the coping strategies she did as a child. She developed more appropriate coping strategies. And I opened myself up to, this is truly a gift. It is truly a gift because she's here to teach me something. She's taught me confidence, compassion, my own self-worth, her self-worth, my truth, how to stand up for myself, how to advocate for people. Without her, I know for sure I would not be doing the work that I do. And so there's so many gifts to her. And she's not here when I'm recording this because I'm sure she's tired of hearing it because I do talk about it quite a bit. But and I don't want her to feel that the first 10 years of her life, I just hated her, because I didn't hate her. I hated the disability. I hated what it was doing to my emotions, to my children, my boys, to my family, to my marriage, to my day to day. It was so hard. She had no friends, and my boys had plenty of friends. And so then I became her person. I am her person. I'm her friend, her mom, her driver, her advocate, her doctor's assistant. Everything that this child, who's now 30, needs falls on me. And at that time, it felt overwhelming. It doesn't anymore because we found our groove. But I was just having a conversation with a dear friend of mine, and we were talking about her birthday parties because that is a very tender wound for me. It's healed, but the scar tissue is still very tender if you touch it. And so her birthdays bring up a lot for me, especially this year. The 30th was a big one. And this friend of mine who's known me and known Lindsay her whole life remembers the birthday parties where people didn't show up. And just how awful that was, not for her because she was oblivious, but for me as her mom, to just know that there are not people out in the world encouraging their children to befriend somebody who is different. That rocked my world. And it rocked my world so much that now I make it a point to reach out to people that are different, to find people that are different, to love on people that are different, because I know what that felt like as a family member, as a parent. And I just will not let another human being in my world that I see or interact with or at the grocery store ever feel like they're not valuable, because it sucks. It was so awful. So we got through that season of our life. The elementary years were absolutely hell. She found coping strategies. To this day, some of her coping strategies are a little bit quirky, a little bit odd, but it is what it is. For example, a transition object. Nobody, unless you know autism, knows what that means. It means that we take an object from our home, typically, as a transition to a new environment. For somebody living with autism, that is incredibly hard to not just leave something and go to the next environment. So having something to transition to the new place is really important. I call it her luggage because I feel like even if we run to Starbucks in the drive-through, we're not even getting out of the car. She has to pack her luggage, and her luggage is her backpack, her case of markers and coloring books, her big case of crayons, her Nintendo Switch. She needs it all, even just to go through the drive-through at Starbucks. There's times where I kind of have to limit that. Like if we're grocery shopping, you're not going to be able to carry your luggage and get groceries. So you need to pick one or two pieces of luggage. She hates that I call it that, and take it into the store. I've also eliminated bringing a stuffed animal into the community because she's 30. She looks very young. She doesn't look 30, but it's still not appropriate in my mind to have a young adult. She looks more like she's 14 carrying a stuffed animal to the grocery store. It's just not needed. So we've kind of moved away from stuffed animals as our objects to something else. Now, in the school setting, getting her to transition from, you know, her safe special education room and go into the lunchroom or go into PE, which was really hard. We gave her a transition object that had something to do with the next place. So if you're going to PE, I need you to carry this basket of balls and give it to the PE teacher. So in her mind, she had a reason to go there. Without a reason, there would be a meltdown. We're way past meltdowns, but she still needs that transition object from home to wherever she's going. Right now, as a 30-year-old, she's independently volunteering at the Humane Society 2 days a week. She makes her own special needs transportation ride requests 2 days a week. She knows when to tell him to pick her up, when to bring her home. She knows the address. I throw in a little curveball every once in a while and say, hey, I need you to have the bus drop you off at the grocery store, or at the nail salon. And so she has to figure that out. That has taken a lifetime of skill building to be able to have flexibility like that. I believe in the heart of my hearts that the reason why this young woman with a very low IQ is able to be independent at the Humane Society, make her own metro rides, do what she does, is because I became the advocate that fought really hard for her in middle school to not be sitting in a classroom attempting to take notes in biology that would never mean anything to her, and instead insisting that her school day provide vocational training. That her school day, instead of biology, she was getting a job in the library, learning how to shelve books, learning how to check people in and out, learning how to interface, learning how to have a boss, learning how to show up on time. Absolutely made it my life mission that she was not going to be 30 years old with no skills. That wasn't going to happen for me. I was not going to be one of those parents of a special needs adult that has to hold their hand literally through a parking lot. I wasn't going to be that, because reality is I'm not going to live forever. I'm not going to be around always to make sure she knows how to cross the street. I want her to have meaning in her life, purpose in her life. And right now, that purpose and meaning is petting cats and making dog treats at the Humane Society. That's perfect for her. That's what I worked 20 years to make sure that can happen, so that she has purpose and meaning and she has independence to her ability. So we've gone from struggle to navigating systems, school systems, medical systems, to moderately independent living. She has an apartment that I built in my home for her to live independently. She buys her own groceries with help, reminders. She makes her own meals with help and reminders. There's no stove cooking. She does everything in an air fryer or a microwave. She's rigid in her eating, so I have to kind of flex with that. She has rules assigned, like you have to have 3 things from produce, you need to have, somewhat healthy stuff. But she's basically an adult who needs support in everyday living, but she gets to make choices. And if she chooses to buy a bag of Hershey Kisses, that's her choice. There's so much battles I can do. So when people ask me what is wrong with her, I kind of get a little riled up because nothing is wrong with her. She was born perfectly perfect and happens to have a diagnosis. She has brown hair, she has beautiful green eyes, and she has a diagnosis. So I'm not a big believer, and there's a lot of controversy in this. I'm not a big believer in saying she's autistic. I just don't believe that labeling her as that, even though she is a reflection of that, is really fair. I'm just not a labeler. I don't believe in labeling things. So I don't call her autistic. I say she's Lindsay and she happens to have autism. To me, it sounds better. And maybe someday I'll get off that high horse and whatever. I don't think she cares what she's referred to as. But when she was 17, it became revealed to us that not she didn't really have autism. She actually has a very rare genetic change that results in symptoms or features or characteristics of autism, language delays, um, anxiety disorders, a different shape to her body. She's built kind of different. She has a little bit of extreme lordosis in her low back that causes some pain. She has a different gait. Her kidneys are very small. Her spine is a little deformed in the lower region of her lumbar spine. All of this traces back to this rare genetic change. That I didn't need to know it. It didn't like make or break my life, but it has given so many answers to some of the quirks that just didn't always fit autism, or some of the little things that I'm like, that's just not classic, what you would appear to be classic autism spectrum. And so it gave answers to something that was kind of unknown. And she's in a research study for this rare genetic change. And the way that I was best described to it is we have our ladder of chromosomes, and the 16th rung of the ladder, there's a bazillion file folders. Within that bazillion file folders, there's one missing. And that is the missing genetic piece that has resulted in characteristics of the disabilities, multiple disabilities. So does she still have autism? I don't know. I asked the geneticist that, and he's like, call it what you want. She is who she is. She's Lindsay. She's sweet. She's funny. She's curious. She has beautiful, beautiful hair. And she loves animals. And she also happens to have this. So I've really tried to, sorry about the airplane. I've really tried to move away from what people may perceive as wrong with her to what is right in her world. And in her world, she's independent in many ways. She loves going to Starbucks, girl after my own heart. She's a great kid. But the first part of our relationship in our life was really, really hard. And I say this a lot. You've probably heard it a million times. When I healed my anger and I saw her as a sweet spirit that chose me to be her mom, and she was opening up a door, and I guarantee you her spirit was saying, Mom, if you walk through this doorway with me and link arms with me, instead of, I don't like this, this is hard, this isn't what I wanted, link arms, your world, your life will change. And by golly, it did. It sure did. Without her spirit encouraging me to be the best person I can be, I'm not sure I'd be doing the work I do. In fact, I know I wouldn't be. And that always traces back to her goodness, to who she is, and how she taught me to be an advocate and to be accepting and to love anybody, regardless of their ability, their non-ability, regardless. They are all worthy of love. So my last podcast was about strengths. And my bottom strength is individualization, which, if you watch that, you'll recall means that I pull out individual pieces from every person in my world. And that is my lowest strength because of her. I don't see I don't see the difference. I see the difference, obviously, but I feel that regardless of her disability or her ability or the people I work with, regardless of all of that, we are equal. We are the same. We are all worthy of respect and love and touch and goodness, community, connection. We are all worthy of it, not the individual who proves it or not the individual who blah, blah, blah. I'm just not into that. Boo, we're the same. I could go crazy again about those strengths, but I won't. So that's my story with my girl. And I believe if you are a parent of a child with a disability, or you're a grandparent, or you're an aunt and uncle, or your neighbor has a child with a disability, I would highly, highly, two things. First of all, absolutely 100% unconditional acceptance of who they are, quirks and all. Help them to find coping strategies that are more appropriate so that they're not at harm's way, that they're not more isolated from the world, like carrying a huge, 4-foot horse to King Supers at age 30. It's a little isolating. Just don't do that. Take this instead. Take your book. And then, so accept unconditionally, but guide, and then teach the people in their world, his or her world, to encourage them to be independent by providing them meaning and purpose in their life. I once had a student, because I did this for a living for 14 years, was an advocate for people with autism, helped teachers understand it. If I could find a student, and maybe the student's thrill was wiping tables. Parents sometimes are like, my child should not be wiping tables. If the child loves wiping tables, then you run with it. If you run with it, it's not your life, it's the child's life. And if the child finds purpose and meaning in wiping tables and being a janitor in middle school instead of sitting in social studies, let them encourage that. If your child or this person has a deep interest in books, maybe they could find a volunteer position on a library. You're connecting what they're passionate about with a potential place for them to find purpose and meaning. Not everybody understands money or the value of money or getting a paycheck. Lindsay's paycheck comes in the form of bringing home videos and pictures of the cats that she got to take care of, talking about maybe her coworkers and her mixing a recipe for dog treats. Her currency is not money, doesn't mean anything to her. Her currency is the purring of a cat or the cutest little puppies you've ever going to see. And, she always comes home and says, the cutest little thing. And I know you don't want any more dogs, Mom, so I didn't bring it home. Plus, you'd kill me. Every week, it's the same thing. Lots of the same repeated language. You just roll with it. You just roll with it. So, purpose and meaning and unconditional acceptance. That will take that individual farther than any other thing. Purpose and meaning and unconditional acceptance. A little bit of guiding and tweaking for some of the quirky things that might be standoffish to people. They're going to be just fine. As a parent, you're going to be just fine. It all works out. We all find our way. That's what I got for you today. That's what I got for you. All right. There's more to come on advocating, disability advocating. There is absolutely more to come on that. I got a lot to say about guardianship, power of attorney, how to job coach, when to step back, when to step in, your role as a lifelong maybe provider for your person. Doesn't mean that you're walking through the grocery store holding their hand. It means you are preparing them to the best of your ability for when you're no longer here. Then you're doing your job. But I'll get off my high horse on that. All right. I'll see you next week for more wisdom with me. Take care. Have a great day. See you soon.